Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We are starting a new sermon series called Community, Coming Together in God's Love. Now, some of you are happy that we are moving on from the last sermon series, which we were talking about heaven and hell, right? I guess it was pretty boring. I don't know. It was controversial, I would say. And today you're like, yes, finally, we are going to be less controversial. No, actually, no. We're going to talk about politics. Yeah, if heaven and hell wasn't that bad, then we're trying everything we can to just keep the tensions high. No, well, we are talking about politics, but not in the way that you think. So, but yesterday there was what was it called? The No King's March, right? And before that, something else was happening before that. There's just tensions are really high right now. And here's the thing. Well, we could tell when we look outside into the world, whether if you're like in high school or if you're in college or if you're an adult or a senior, you know right now that the thing that's happening right now is that we all, next slide, that we all disagree politically, and especially inside the church. As a matter of fact, if you go to a church and you find out that everybody agrees politically, chances are it might be a cult, okay? So, right? So do not, this is actually a healthy thing that we disagree politically. Even if you are all on the left or all on the right, even inside of that circle, there should be some type of disagreement and some kind of dialogue and discourse that's happening, right? And so, but here's the thing. As Christians, we are called to do this, to love unconditionally. And so there's these two tensions here, like we're supposed to disagree with each other, right? And that's a good thing, but we're also supposed to love each other unconditionally. That's what Jesus called us to do. So the question that we're going to be trying to address during this series is this: can we disagree politically and that's the key, and love unconditionally? Can we do both? Or maybe the more important question that we should be asking ourselves, because this is a question I'm asking you, but the question we should be asking ourselves is, do we want to disagree politically and love unconditionally? Like, do we have it in us to say, hey, where we are right now, I guess we disagree with the person sitting next to our left or right, but do we want to put in the effort to be able to get along with people that we disagree with politically? Like, do we really want to work on that? Because it's a lot of work, right? So, before we start this, I want to talk about this word, politics. Politics, because right now, you're probably thinking, there's two things that we try to avoid talking in my family dinners. Politics and religion, right? And then, here's the thing. I found it pretty easy to avoid talking about politics at my home. It's pretty hard to avoid talking about politics at church. Talking about religion at church, because that's pretty much what we do here. But what I want to do is I want to distill the word politics to its original meaning and talk, and we're going to be addressing that, because some of you are thinking this. You're thinking, Pastor, stay in your lane, right? Like, why are you talking about politics? So I want to tell you what I believe politics means and what I believe that the word politics actually means, and we'll talk about that rather than what pop culture tells us what politics is. So, the word politics comes from the Greek word polis. That's where we get the word metropolis, okay? Polis. Polis means simply, it just means city or a group of people living together, okay? So, let me set up a scenario for you guys. Let's just say there's this island and nobody's on there. There's one palm tree and surrounded by water. And then, I don't know how, maybe your plane crashed or whatever, but there's 4 survivors. Maybe you went on a 3-hour tour. I don't know. But you ended up on an island, and there's 4 of you guys. And the sun's going down, and you're thinking, if we don't eat right now, we're all going to die. We're all going to starve. And so you guys are looking around. You're like, okay, you know what? We could take some of that tree and build something. We can make fire. There's some fish in the water. All right, everybody, go get your own food. Go pitch your own tent. And then we end up with this, right? Because you're like, we got 4 guys. If you want to feed yourself, you got to go get your own fish. You got to make your own home. You got to build your own fire, and we're going to be fine. But this is rarely the situation. When you think about a scenario where you're on a deserted island, this is what most people think of. But that's rarely the reality, because you're thinking we have 4 able bodies there. But what if those 4 people are not 4 people who are able-bodied and has the ability to fish. But what if it looked like this, where we had a baby and we had somebody who couldn't walk, right? What then? Can we say, okay, for this 4 of us, go get your own food. Go. What is a baby supposed to do, right? What is this person supposed to do? So eventually you start to make agreements with each other. You say, okay, I was a Boy Scout and I know how to, fish. I will go out there and get fish for all of us. But while I'm doing that, can you, because I know you're good at pitching tents and building houses or whatever, can you go and make us some tents? Like, sure, I'll do that. And what about the babies? Like, baby, you just do your baby thing, But what about you? It's like, well, I'm a strategizer. I put people in the places they need to be in order that everything works efficiently. It's like, okay, let's do that. And then, next slide, we end up with the civilization. Politics is basically people working together so that we could survive, that we could excel, we could live together in harmony. That's what politics is. How do we get a bunch of people to work together to live together, right? And then maybe one day you're like, everything's working, but then a new wrench is thrown into the situation. Next slide. Like somebody invades with a lightsaber, right? And you're like, I don't know what to do in this situation. And then this guy's like, okay, I know how to organize the people in a way where we could defend ourselves, right? So everybody gets different roles, and eventually somebody rises up as a leader that gives everybody instructions on how, we should act and how we should, organize. That's what politics is. Politics is basically how can we survive together, and usually one person or a committee of people rises to the top to give instructions on how we ought to do everything. So usually that person at the top is the one that sets the scene, sets the mood, sets the environment, tells us, okay, in this situation, maybe we need to put in a policy about this, right? In order so that we could survive the winter, we want to make sure that we store this much food to the side. And, we also know there's people who can't feed themselves. So make sure that we have a system in place that, that person could survive this type of situation. That's what politics is. Politics is how do we live together and how do we survive together, right? And you have people taking on different roles. So if that's what politics is, then almost everything Jesus taught was political. Everything Jesus talked about was how do we treat one another? How do we love one another? What do we do with our enemies? What do we do with somebody who is caught in a crime, right? If somebody was caught in adultery, what do we do with that person, right? We have somebody who's a tax collector, who is a traitor. What do we do with that person? Like, what if somebody were to wrong us 7 times? Are we supposed to forgive them 7 times? Jesus had something to say about that, right? So Jesus, everything he talked about, almost everything he talked about was political. And you're like, oh, okay, I could kind of see that. But you're like, but that's not what I think of when I think about politics. I think about right versus left. I think about who the new president's going to be or who our mayor is going to be, right? Like, I think about that. And for that, we have another word that's basically being partisan, and Jesus was never partisan. He is neither left nor right. Now, I know that you could take verses out of the Bible and make it sound like, like these verses back up my candidate, or this person backs up my political party. I understand that, and we'll talk about that maybe. We'll see, right? But what Jesus says over and over and over again is, if you are to call me Lord, meaning if you are going to be my follower, right? Jesus says, if you're going to be my follower, that means you have to adopt my version of politics. Meaning, if you want to be my follower, then you need to forgive the people to get along with them. You have to be generous with the people around you, right? Jesus was very political because he always talked about was how you ought to live so that you could get along with the people around you, right? So, in case that you are a Christian today, what I'm about to talk about is mandatory. If you're not a Christian, you could give it a try. What we're talking about today, this series, you can be like, okay, that sounds cool. I'll give it a try. You're more than welcome to do that. But if you call yourself a Christian, what we're talking about is what you must do. It's not like, well, I don't feel like it. So the question is this. So what is the politics of Jesus? What did he teach us about how we're supposed to live in a community, right? What did Jesus say about this topic? Well, he said a lot of things. And if you've been coming to this church for a long time, you probably heard me talk about like all hundreds, 200, thousands. I don't know. I never counted how many things Jesus told us to do, but there's a lot of things that Jesus told us to do. But cuts, please, we don't have time to go over all the things that Jesus talked about. Can you give me just one thing, like one mission critical thing? If we forget everything, but just remember one thing that Jesus taught us to do, what is that one thing, right? Or in other words, what is Jesus' priority for how his people should live in community? Well, it turns out there is this one passage in the book of John where Jesus reveals this one mission critical thing that we all need to do if we are to be a community. Okay? And that section in theological circles, or maybe in your Bible, the subtitle on top of that section of scripture, it's called the high priestly prayer. Now, what is that? So in some circles of Christianity, and maybe in some of your life groups, we have something called prayer requests. Okay? And basically what that is like we sit in a circle or whatever shape you want, doesn't matter, it could be in a line. And then we go around saying like, hey, do you guys have any prayer requests? And so one person would say, yeah, actually, if this group could pray for me about, I don't know, I've been going through something that is causing a lot of anxiety. Can you guys pray for me? Or another person would say, oh, my prayer request is that, my son or my daughter or my parents are going through this. Can you please pray for them? And so you basically go around in a circle asking people to pray for the thing that's like most on your mind. Well, the high priestly prayer is actually Jesus's prayer request. And this is found in John chapter 17. And here's the thing. In John chapter 18, the very next chapter, is when Jesus gets arrested. And then he has to say goodbye to his disciples. Like up until then, they were hang out together and they would have these moments around the campfire. And Jesus is basically saying, after this moment right here, we're never going to have that again. This is the last time that we could share prayer requests with each other. So what did Jesus ask for prayer? What is the thing that was on his mind before he said bye to his 12 disciples? What is the thing that he asked prayer for? Well, let's find out. This is chapter 17. It's a pretty big section. We're just going to pick out some verses along the way. This is how it starts. He says, Father, this is him praying, Father, the hour has come. The moment where I'm going to be taken away from my disciples, the moment where I'm going to be hanging on the cross, where I'm going to die, it has come now. So he says, Father, glorify your Son. Glorify means put a spotlight on me. He's the Son. He's like, put a spotlight on me. I want the whole world to see what I'm about to do so that your Son may glorify you. When people see me going through the torture I'm about to go through, because people are going to arrest me and flog me and slap me and spit on me and then eventually nail me to the cross, when the whole world sees me, they're going to be able to see you on display also. So he's like, please, my first prayer request is that the whole world sees what I'm about to go through. And then a few verses later, he says this, I will remain in the world no longer. My time here is very short now. But he's talking about the disciples, they are still in the world. And I am coming to you. Right? So they are the 12 disciples that he's been walking around the earth with for 3 years, roughly 3.5 years, right? And like, look, I'm still going to be with them in spirit, but my physical presence is not going to be here anymore. So at this point, he turns to the 12 and he says, this is my prayer request for you guys. This is what he says. He said, Holy Father, protect them. Protect them by the power of your name, the name you gave me. He says, I want you to protect them. But here's the thing. What does he want them to be protected from? From like the Romans, from the other people? Like, no. If you read on, you'll find out what it is specifically that Jesus is asking God, his Father, to protect his disciples from. What is it? He says, so that, right? He's like, here's the purpose. The purpose, like, I want you to protect them so that they may be one. They could be unified. They could stick together as we are one. It's like Father, the Trinity, like we are one in mission, right? My prayer request is that my disciples, the 12 of them, will be one. Well, is that a really hard thing, Jesus? Because like they've been hanging out for 3 years. They seem like they're getting along. It's like, you have no idea. When something goes crazy, I'm the one that comes in and says, guys, come on, let's get along, right? I'm not going to be there, right? I'm not going to be there to keep dispel the tension. Can they do it themselves? Right? Can they do it? Here's a quick overview of who we're dealing with. There's 12 disciples. We don't know much information about all of them, but we do know some things about some of them. Here's 8 of them. There are 4 fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Okay? And then we have a person who is in charge of finances, Judas, which we know later on he betrays Jesus. We have a zealot. A zealot is a person who says, if there is political tension, the best way to deal with this is through violence. They are like, let's go to war. Oh, somebody disagrees politically, let's go cut them off. Let's go fight them. Let's go silence them. That's what a zealot is, okay? And then we have this guy, his name is Philip. We think that he's probably half Jewish, half Gentile, right? So we also have somebody who doesn't fit ethnically into the group, to which a zealot would be like, well, you're not one of us. Like imagine if you're in a situation and there's one person with a different skin color. That's basically Philip, okay? And then in the middle of all this, we have Matthew, who's a tax collector. A tax collector is basically someone who says, well, the Romans have come into our land and taken over everything, so let's join them. And everybody else is like, no, we need to fight against it. This guy really wants to fight against them, right? And he's like, you know what? I could be rich if I just joined in with the opposition. So Matthew, he says, I want the Roman Empire to hire me to go around my friends and family collecting money from them so they could continue to fund their military operation while everybody gets hungry and starves. That's Matthew. As a matter of fact, what we do know is these fishermen, there was so many different taxes back then. The fishermen, they would go out to sea and they'll catch all the fish and they'll come back on shore. And right when you get back on shore, there's a tax collector. How many fish did you catch? 100? Well, you owe me 70 of it. 70% tax on everything you catch. So these people were middle to poor class, lower class. He was crazy rich. He might have been rich. We don't know about him much, and we know that he wanted to fight everybody. And Jesus says, hey, all you guys, come follow me, right? So Jesus is wondering after I go, I wonder what's going to happen to these guys, right? And he says, here's my one prayer request. I want them to be one. Political tension is high in this group, right? Can you please be one? This is his prayer request. He said, this is mission critical. You could miss out on everything else, but if there's one thing you could get right, get this one thing right. Just make sure that you are one. And another reason why they didn't get along is because, like I said, in the island, right? Eventually somebody's going to rise to the top. And that person's version of what they think that they should do to survive eventually becomes the norm, right? So throughout Jesus' ministry, and he will always hint one day I'm going to die, so I'm not going to be around it much longer. And then the disciples start talking about, so who is going to take your place? Or another way of saying it is, who is the greatest in the kingdom of God? Who is the one that's going to be the leader of this pack? And so they kept on asking each other, who is the greatest disciple, Jesus? Can you tell us? Who is the one that you want sitting on your right hand or on your left hand? Who is the one that's going to hold the power over the other 11? And it wasn't just the 12 of them, by the way. There were other followers. So it's like, I'm not just going to be a leader of just 11 or 12 of them. I'm going to be the leader of all the people who are following Jesus. And so Jesus is like, please, I'm praying that they get along, right? Right? Because you really want them to get along. And so, but we're here 2,000 years later, looking back at this story thinking must have been hard for them, but that's not us, Jesus wasn't praying for us, was he? He's like, well, actually he was. Look at the next part of the prayer. He says, my prayer is not for them alone. It's not just the 12 I'm talking about. Oh, who else are you talking about? Well, Jesus says, I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, meaning everybody after them also. So he's also praying for us, right? Because if they believe in me, right, then they're all going to have the same situation. They're going to have churches, and we want to know who's in charge, right? Which political view are we going to take, right? So he says that all of them, not just the 12, but also the thousands and millions of followers in the future, that all of them may be one. You just, what about we just don't talk about politics and then we'll just kind of get along because we don't have to talk about it and then we'll all get along. It's like, no. I'm not just saying they should just coexist together. I want them to be one, just as, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. There's this idea that we're supposed to meld into one without agreeing with each other politically. Remember, diversity is a good thing. So I'm not talking about uniformity. I'm not saying that everybody has to agree with the politics of the person in charge. He's not saying that. He's saying that everybody will get along with each other while disagreeing with each other. Can you stay one? Can you remain as one while disagreeing with each other? Now you think about it, Jesus' prayer request, Jesus, pray for something, pray for rain or something. This is impossible. That is probably, I don't what do you the big request right before he goes away, right? So, just to recap, Jesus' prayer requests, unity amidst diversity, and the second thing is that power would not get in the way of community. He didn't say power is bad. He's just saying that if people are always trying to fight for power, then the community cannot stand, right? So is it possible, Jesus? How are we going to do this? Are you praying? Is this one of those prayers where we know that it's not going to happen, right? Well, Jesus seemed to think that this is actually possible. And not only that, he believed that this is mission critical. So the question on everybody's mind, including mine, is, but how? How do we do this, right? How do we do this? Oh, maybe somebody figured something out in the early church. After Jesus died and rose again, the church started. Maybe somebody in the first century church, somebody there must have figured it out. Well, it turns out it went well for a few years, right? But then people started losing the plot and the same problems started to seep into the church. As a matter of fact, there were a lot of churches that were starting to pop up in the first century, and they would pretend like there was no tension. Because we're Jesus followers. We're all one. We're good. We're one voice. We're fine, right? And then eventually a guy named Paul, who was one of the first Christian leaders, would show up and say, actually, it's not okay right now. You need to fix a few things because what you think is unity is not unity at all. You're just burying and suppressing. You're dressing the chaos in your church with Christian words to make you think that it's actually okay. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at a whole chapter in the book of Romans. Because there's this one chapter in the book of Romans where Paul is basically giving everybody instructions on how they need to get along. And that using Christian words to cover up your language, it doesn't make the problem go away. So let me set up the scene for you guys. Paul hears about this church in Rome, and he wants to go visit them, so he's writing this letter letting them know he's going to be coming soon. And he notices that there's two main groups in the church. We'll call them A and B. A thinks that they're better than B, so A is we should be in charge, and you do what we tell you to do. But B has a counter argument, which is, no. Our counter argument is, we're better, and so you should submit to us. Okay, so that's the tension that's happening in the book before the book of Romans was written, okay? And so Paul writes a letter to them saying, the first 11 chapters is basically Paul saying, guys, we're all messed up. So no one has an edge on anybody here, okay? And then in chapter 12, he gets into the application. So this is what you need to do. And this is how it starts. This is chapter 12, verse 1. I urge you, I plead you, I'm on my knees, please get this right. Brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. What's going on here? In those days, before the Jesus thing happened, people would bring animals and kill it and put it on the altar. And let's just say I brought a pigeon, right? And God's like, that's good, right? But not just that, the people around you are like, ooh, look at that pigeon. Wow, Katz is holy today, right? And then somebody else, let's just say Daniel, it's like, I brought a goat. And now I feel like, oh, wow, Daniel's sacrifice is way better than mine. And everyone's like, ooh, look at how holy that guy is. So next week, I bring in a cow, boom, right? And everyone's like, ooh, Katz, he's the guy, right? And so there's this like competition that's happening of whose sacrifice is better than whose. And Paul says, you guys are trying to one-up each other, right? That's not how it works in community. If you want to do this game, play this game of whose sacrifice is the best, here's an idea. Sacrifice yourself. Play that game. Well, what does that look like? Consider the other person better than yourself. That's put yourself second to the people around you, especially if you're on side A. He says, I want you to treat yourself as if side B is better than you. If you have one sack lunch and it's either you eat and they starve or they eat and you starve, you give the sack lunch to the other person. That's being a living sacrifice. Play that game instead. Well, let's see what else he says. Do not conform to the patterns of this world where everybody is split, saying, I'm on side A, I'm on side B. A is better because B is bad, or B is better because A is bad. You're like, you're fear-mongering both sides. Like, no, we're not going to play that game. He's like, don't play into the patterns of this world. You know exactly, and even for us today, we know what the patterns of the world looks like. Right? You guys have seen the news, right? You guys seen what's been happening. We're always saying our side is better than the other side. And then the other side lies about the other side. And then we're like, well, we can't trust either side. Both sides are fake news or whatever, right? Don't fall and play that game. He says, don't fall into that pattern, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and improve, and this is really weird, what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And he's talking about God's will. Like, what is he talking about here? Remember earlier on, I said that in this church, people are using Christian words to cover up, right? These people were trying to get the top position, whatever that top position is, in the church. So let's just say there's like a preacher. And he says, preacher comes from side A, therefore side A is better than side B. It's like, well, our worship leader is from side B. So, and we all know people come to church because they want to hear the worship leader sing, not because they want to hear a message. So side B is, like, since this worship leader is from side B, we're going to just say that B is better than A, so you should submit to us, right? And he says, no. These positions are power grabs, right? I don't know if you guys ever played like make-believe as kids. Like, hey, let's pretend that we're gonna pretend that we're a school, and there's always one kid's like, oh, I'm the principal, right? And I tell you what to do, right? or hey, let's pretend like we're making a movie. Oh, I'm director, because I tell everybody what to do, right? Like everybody wants to have that top position, not because they're good at it, but they just want to be the most powerful person in that make-believe situation. Here is the same thing. We're in a church, and here is somebody that's like, oh, I'm the preacher because, I'm the most important person here. It's like, well, I'm the worship leader. And then another person comes in, well, I'm the one that funds this whole operation. That makes me the most important person. And another person shows up like, well, I'm the one that makes food for this congregation. I'm the most important person, right? And everybody's like trying to grab, they're not like, I'm this position because, this my gifting. They're just trying to get these positions because they want to be the most important person. It's a power grab, just like how the disciples were. Paul is saying what happened with the 12 disciples is happening with you right now. It's just in a cloak called church. He says, but if you don't follow the patterns of this world, if you start to live as if you're a living sacrifice, when you start considering that the other person is more important than you, at that point, you'll truly discover what your role in this community is. That's what this verse is saying. And he continues, and you'll see this play out even more. For, by grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. It's like, you guys need to start seeing yourself as who you truly are. Stop. Like, when you start grabbing for power in a community or in a nation or whatever the situation is, when you start grabbing for power, you're not thinking of yourself as you truly are. Start looking at yourself as you actually are. For just as each of us, next slide, there we go, has one body with many members, as these members do not have, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. So he's saying, think of us as different parts of a human body. Hand, elbow, whatever, right? Paul makes an interesting observation about the human body. He says, have you noticed that the right hand does not exist for the right hand? The right hand exists because my right hand cannot do anything for itself. My right hand could take care of my left hand. And when I have an itch on my elbow, right? But my right hand can't do anything for itself. It says right here, it says, each member belongs to all the others. This hand exists for the rest of my body. This ear exists for the rest of my body. It does not exist for itself. The purpose of a body part is so it can serve the rest of the body. My legs, my foot, my right foot by itself can't go anywhere. Maybe it could flop around or whatever, but it can't go anywhere. But I have 2 feet because it could take the rest of my body from point A to point B, right? So Paul says, think about the human body. Just use your logic, guys. You're not going to try to grab the highest place of power just for yourself. You need to do this because you're thinking about everybody else. So look at this island again, okay? Island picture, next slide. There we go. This island. Okay. When you think about how do I express myself to other people? When I am thinking I need to be a living sacrifice, I need to do this to love the other side, right? You're not going to be like, I want to be the chief of this island because I want to be because I want to have power. What you want to do is, I want to be the chief of this island because when I love other people, that's naturally what I end up doing. Right? So the question we should be asking ourselves is, if I were to stop and become selfless and say, what is the best way for me to love other people? What is the natural manifestation of that love? Okay, we'll get into this a little deeper if you don't understand what I'm talking about. Paul continues, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. Okay, and then he starts going through this list. If your gift is prophesying, meaning if you were to stop and say, how can I best love the person I disagree with? Right? How can I love that person? And the first thing that comes to mind is, well, when I love somebody, I start speaking words of encouragement, like I start prophesying. It's like, well, if that's your case, then I want you to prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, like when I think about how to love other people, I start thinking like, oh, I want to make sure that person is doing well. I want to make sure that that person has coffee. I want to make sure that like, can I, hold your hand as you cross the street? Whatever it is. If serving is the first thing that comes to mind, if that's a natural manifestation of you putting yourself second, then he says, then serve. If it's teaching, like this is me, when I'm reading something and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. This is so good. I can't wait to tell everybody. This is my love language, guys. Like people are like, what's your love language? Like, I like to teach, right? If you think about how can I put myself second, the first thing you think about is I need to teach what I just discovered, what I learned about God. He said, if that's your case, then teach. When I tell you that you need to put yourself second and love other people, and the first thing that comes to mind is, well, I need to encourage people. He says, then I want you to give encouragement. Some of you think about giving. Maybe your love language is giving gifts to other people, right? So you're like, when I think about how I could love the other person, I think about how like I'm going to make some, I'm put money in an envelope and give it to them, or I'm going to give them my car, or I'm going to give them what. Like if that's your case, everybody's different, right? If that's your situation, then give generously. If by chance, when you think about how you could love the other group, if by chance that makes you think, well, they're going in the direction of destruction, and I could lead them out of it. If the natural manifestation of you loving the other side, the people you disagree with, is to lead, then he says, then do it diligently. And if it is to show mercy, if that's how you show love, then do it cheerfully. Paul isn't going through a list of things of how, what your spiritual gift might be. he's going through a list here of, guys, everybody's love looks differently. But when we all love the way that God has created us to love, then your role starts to become more and more apparent. Look at the list here, guys. If you look at this list, prophesying, serving, teaching, encouraging, giving, leading, showing mercy, these are all things that benefits another person more than yourself in every situation. He says, you don't grab at positions of power because you want power. You start from a place of selflessness, loving, caring for the other person, and then you start to discover your role in the community. Your role in your community is discovered by how you love. There are people here in this church, when you think about loving, you're like, the only way I know how to love is to prepare food for people. And we say, God bless you. For some of you, like myself, it's teaching. Every time I teach, it's because I love you. You know, when I prepare a sermon, I have like my Bible, I have my researches, I have my books, and I have my screen. I'm looking at everything with my highlighter. I'm marking things down. I'm typing things up. But the entire time, I have your faces in my mind. I think about, like, I wonder if this is good for that person. And I wonder, if this person, how this person is going to receive this message. I have you in my mind and my heart when I prepare messages because this is how I love, okay? As opposed to, I know people, like in seminary, I met people like, I just love being on stage. That's why I want to be a preacher. And my professor straight out said, then you shouldn't be a preacher, right? For some of you, the best way for you to know when you think about loving the people in your congregation, you're like, I want to pray for them. And those of you who are like that, you guys are in the prayer ministry, and that's exactly where you should be, right? Oh, somebody just lost somebody. My heart goes out to them. I'm just going to be praying for them nonstop. And we are so thankful that you're a part of our church because we need you. We need people who pray. Others of you, the best way you know how to love, when you think about like how can I love the people in this church, you think, I just want to make sure that when they come into this church, they're greeted with love. Because there's so many people who come into this church and not one person says hi, and I'm so thankful that we have greeters at this church who feel like, I want to make sure every person that comes in through that door knows that they are loved. If that's you, God bless you for doing that. Do it cheerfully. Some of you, and I've experienced this personally, the way you show love, at least to me, is by telling me dad jokes. And you know what? I love that. Because I think dad jokes is the highest form of intelligence. Because I'm not encouraging you to do more dad jokes, but I'm like, wow, this person thought this through because that's like that word sounds like this word, and I could see that pun. I know most people don't think it's funny, but that takes a lot of work, right? So maybe that's your thing, right? Some of you, when you think about how to show love to this congregation, you think of childcare. I want to raise the next generation of people, these children, so that they know the politics, how to live their faith, right? Some of you, when you think about love, you think music, and you're like, I want to play music. I want to sing. I want to play guitar. I want to do all these things to let everybody know that I want to lead them in this place of worship. If that's you, right, the worship team is exactly where you should be. Last week, I saw somebody giving driving lessons to a 13-year-old in the parking lot, which I think is illegal. So I'm not going to use her name. But that's how you love. My son is 12, so, you can give him drive. I know that my wife is going to be like, I don't know if I'm ready to, sit in the car when he turns 15 or 16. I'm so glad that you exist, because if that's you, we have 2 kids that are going to be growing up in the next 10 years. They're going to be learning to drive. So, yes, God bless you, right? My wife was just telling me the other day, every week she comes to church on Sunday mornings, somebody comes to her with a bag saying, look, I have some crafts for your classroom, because they know that teachers have to pay for their own crafts. And she's like, yeah, like some people, they love on me by giving me all these egg cartons and all these things. Thank you for loving on my wife like that. Actually, Benny, every time I come to church, his way of showing love to me is he always asks me, how's your back? Because he saw me one Sunday, and I could barely move my neck. Every Sunday since, he's been asking me, how's your back? How's your back? He even let me borrow his Shiatsu automatic machine, whatever, right? I mean, that's how he shows love, right? And this is what Paul is saying. He says, guys, I know you guys they're having this battle back and forth. Who's greater, who's greater, who's greater? Start from a place of saying, you're better, and this is how I act that out, and then you'll start to discover your role in the church. And then he continues. He says, so for that reason, love must be sincere. It has to come from the heart. Don't fake it, okay? Because it'll eventually show. Some people will fake love in order to get to high places. He says, don't do that. Be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good, because we see too much of that in the world. People clinging onto evil to get higher places, right? Be devoted to one another in love. Show loyalty to each other. If the other person is hurt, you're going to be there for that person, even though you disagree politically. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. What he's saying here is eventually you're going to get to a place where you're going to be so discouraged because you're putting yourself second. He says, don't give up. Don't get burnt out doing good things, because you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. Don't burn out doing good. As a matter of fact, I want you to do the opposite, which is be joyful. Be joyful in hope. Be patient in affliction. Faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. In the first century church, what they did was when they saw somebody in the church that was in need, they had like 2 TVs, so like I'm not using one. Here, you could have this. Or I will sell this, and with the money, they said they shared so many things with each other that nobody had any lack. Imagine that kind of community, right? That's Jesus' politic right there. And he says, practice hospitality. For some of you, the way that you show love is like, you should come over and I'll make you dinner. And then Paul also knows that in this A versus B type of world, people are being persecuted inside the church by each other. So he says, when somebody does something wrong to you, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. If somebody is celebrating on side B and you're on side A, our typical tendency is, look at them rejoicing. Well, I'm sure that person lacks, it's hard to rejoice with their enemies. And he says, no. You need to rejoice with them. And as a matter of fact, don't rejoice when they're mourning. You need to mourn with them, because you guys are part of the same family. You don't agree politically, maybe not even theologically, but you need to commit yourself to each other. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people in low positions. If somebody is in a really bad place, don't act like, hey, why don't you just come over to my house and, you could enjoy the rich life for the next few days. No. Join them in the low places. Show empathy. Feel their hurt. That's the politics of Jesus. Don't be conceited. And then he says, in case there's like animosity amongst you guys, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. When you're trying to love on somebody, make sure it's in a form where everybody looks at you and says, oh yeah, that's a good thing. But I know that's impossible at times, right? So that's why he adds this here. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, so try your best, live at peace with everyone. Because I know this is unrealistic. But as far as you could go, take it. As far as you could take it as far as you can. And then after this, Paul kind of quotes some Old Testament passages about how your kindness, if somebody does something bad to you and you repay them with kindness, it's like putting heaps of coal on top of their heads. I know that doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but that's a reference to Isaiah chapter 6. In Isaiah chapter 6, coal touching someone's lip was to purge away the sin that was causing evil. What he's saying is, if you repay the evil with kindness, you might be purging away the thing that is actually causing you guys to be enemies in the first place. And then he concludes the whole chapter by saying this: do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Why? Because if you are saying that you are a follower of Jesus, this is mission critical. The politics of Jesus is that you are always one, regardless of your disagreements. As a matter of fact, because of your disagreements, you should be one. The foundation of Jesus' politics is to continually choose love. No matter what the situation is, always choose love. And because you call yourselves followers of Jesus, our politics in the world should be shaped by our loyalty to Jesus, not the other way around. I think nowadays it's been the other way. Because I'm in this political group, I think Jesus is saying this in this passage. Paul would say, no, that's ridiculous. Because of Jesus' politics, my politics in this world should be shaped by that. So, Jesus starts off by praying, I want my people to be one. Paul, years later, writes a letter to the Roman church saying, you guys want to know what position you're supposed to be in the church? Start off with the place of being a living sacrifice. Put other people's ahead of you, right? And when you do that, you'll start to discover what role you're supposed to play in your community. And I think it'd be fitting for us to end this whole sermon by going back to the end of Jesus' prayer. And he says this, just a little review. He says, I pray that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I'm in you. And then he says this, may they also be in us so that, he's like, I have another reason why you should be one. So that the world may believe that you have sent me. The world is going to look at the world that's divided, A versus B, right? The world is going to do their thing. And then they're going to look at you guys, and he's like, wait a minute, you guys are getting along. You guys are committed to each other. You guys are always disagreeing, but you always are there for each other. When the world sees that, right, they're going to be like, oh, Jesus must be the Son of God. The greatest form of evangelism is for the church to be one. Jesus says, if you could get that right, that's the greatest form of evangelism. The greatest way for people to know who Jesus is by looking at the church being one. Now, if everybody in the church agrees with each other politically, then there'll be no surprise there. But he's like, the church is so diverse. By any other metric, you should not be getting along, but you are. Like, you disagree with the person I voted for, you disagree with the person I voted for, but when that person was in pain, you were the first person there to take care of that person. You prepared a meal for that person. You drove that person around when he didn't have a car, right? He's like, when they see that, they're going to be like, wow, Jesus must be the Son of God. And Jesus actually is making a reference to something he taught 4 chapters ago in chapter 13. This is what he says. A new command I give you. He's telling his disciples. Mission critical. Love one another. Love one another. How? As I have loved you. And you know how I loved you. I love you sacrificially. I put you guys first. So you must love one another. Right? He repeats it just to make sure you get it right. And he says, but if you do this, by this, if you do this, if you are God's representation to this world and you're not dividing over politics, if you're able to do this, then everyone will know that you are my disciples. We will be known by the love that we show one another. And like, what do you mean? Like, everyone's going to know that we're Christians by what? Oh, in case you missed the first 2 times I said it, I'll say it again. If you love one another. To Jesus, being one is mission critical. It is the most important thing you could do because what it means is that you're willing to put your politics aside for the sake of loving one another. And Paul talks about it even more by saying, and the way you do that is by making yourself a living sacrifice. If the church is dividing over worldly politics, the world would not care about Jesus. That's what he's saying here. So, let me summarize. I actually made 3 points here today, and I don't know if you guys kept up with it, but here it is. Number 1, Christians must act out of love in all we do in our communities. Love is our motivation, not politics. Love is our motivation, putting the other person first, right? The second point is Christians must be one, especially in the midst of diverse times. The greater the contrast, the more we shine. And the final point is when Christians live as one, the world will take notice. Christians must act out of love. We have to choose love in all that we do in our communities. Christians must be one, especially in this current age that we're in right now. And when we all do this, when we all live as one, the world will see something that's different with us. And you say, well, what is that? It must be Jesus. Amen? Amen. All right, let's pray.